to get it,
to buy it.
to buy it. Hello, Harry. Nice of you to join us.
Well, hello. Is Jumpin' JD Jordan not joining us today?
Oh, he is. He is.
He's just late as usual.
See, Bianca, I told you.
He
It
just
was a
Bianca, hello.
soft 10:45. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. Well, good, because I wanted to make a speech
Oh, good. Perfect.
while we're waiting on Jordan. And, I wanted to talk about our publication and where it sits in the industry, because I had a little bit of a wake-up call yesterday.
Uh-oh.
And that I want to tell you all about. This is a small industry. There's not a lot of people in this industry, but it's big enough that it can support trade publications. And the reason, the only way that it can support trade publications is if the biggest leaders, the biggest companies within the industry support the trade publications, and they do. And we're very fortunate that they do. I remember a few years ago, Boston Beer Company all of a sudden cut their subscriptions when it was time for renewal. And I called Jim Cook, and, he said I was unaware of this. It was, a cost-cutting decision made lower down, and obviously we will reinstate those subscriptions. And I appreciated that. And, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we don't base our coverage on how many subscriptions anybody has, or out of any fear that they're going to cut subscriptions. That's a big tenet, and in our culture, it's what we've always believed in. And a few years ago, right before COVID, Anheuser-Busch cut their subscriptions pretty drastically. And it was, I don't think, a coincidence. It's when Joao left and Michelle came in. I don't know whose decision it was. Cesar's the one that gave us the news. And I bitched and complained and whatever. I don't know if it's a cost-cutting measure. But while we don't base our coverage on subscriptions, in the back of my subconscious mind, I do note who is supporting trade press in this industry. And it's become clear to me that the way Benj and I were treated at the AB meeting in the spring was not right. I don't want to speak for Benj, but I do know that he was pissed off just as I was. I feel like we were used as a kind of a foil for them not to address their distributors because we were in the room, even though I know both of us would have gladly left had we known that we were being used that way. And then just basically all of our coverage was struck out as per our agreement. So it's caused me to rethink how we move forward with that, because it's clear to me that Anheuser-Busch does not, in their current form, support trade press, an active, curious, open trade press. And, when they cut subscriptions, they can take them all away now. It doesn't really matter because they're not even in our top 10 subscriber list. And that's fine. But I met yesterday with an individual who represents one of the largest shareholders of Anheuser-Busch. He was sent here overseas by these shareholders to make inquiries about what the hell is happening in the United States. And in the course of that meeting, and I'm not going to reveal who it was, but he said, Harry, we rely on you to let us know what's going on in this industry. And I want to hear what you actually have to say about the Bud Light situation. And I told him. And I said, if you really want to know, all you have to do is go and listen to BeerNet Radio, because I've been very candid on my thoughts in this platform. And I think we've all restrained from giving our opinions in the newsletter. And for me, it's one of the reasons is because the mainstream press gets a hold of it, and sometimes they take it out of context and use it as a cudgel, and I don't want that. So, but I know that these, producers at Fox and CNBC are not going to listen to a 30-minute podcast to find out. So we can talk a little more freely here. And so I directed toward the podcast. And then I just told them that to me, it's a simple issue of risk assessment, that there were not things in place. Nobody felt like they should raise their hand and say, maybe this is not the best fit for our largest brand. not because of the trans issue, just because of the controversial nature of it. And, when I had mentioned the underage element, and this was way before the Ted Cruz thing, which I think we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So, the point of that is that we don't need the largest brewer's approval, and we don't need their money. It's nice, but they do not support the trade press, and their bosses do support the trade press, the people who own that company. The families that have the largest shareholders, that are the largest shareholders of that company, do support us and the trade press. And they're not happy. They're not happy with the leadership over there. They don't, his main complaint was that, where's Brendan? Where is he? And why isn't he out there throwing cases? And why aren't they putting that on social media? And why has he been invisible? And I didn't have the answer to that question. And the reason I didn't have the answer to that question is because while I've had a pretty good relationship with every CEO of Anheuser-Busch from August Busch the 4th all the way through Joao, I don't think I've ever met Michelle. And I had a little bit of relationship with Brendan, but obviously it's not current. So that's all I have to say about that. I would end with saying that if you look at the numbers of this podcast, I've noticed that even if we don't promote a particular episode of a podcast at all, we don't put it in the newsletter, we don't put it on social media, if we just drop it, within 24 hours, we'll get between 150 and 200 listens or watches between the three platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And that tells me that we have about 150 to 200 regular listeners that tune in every week, even if it's promoted or not, that always listen. And I appreciate that. I want to thank you, those 200. And please, maybe hit a like, don't be shy. But those are the people who understand this industry. And because one of the things that this gentleman related, he's like, why aren't the European analysts even talking about this? And I didn't know. I can't speak for the European analysts, except that they're just not here and they're not seeing what's happening on the ground on a daily basis. And it's not getting better, clearly. And I feel just terrible for the AB wholesalers. I think they are going to get good news probably this week from AB, or just any news probably. And so I think there might be bluer skies for those guys. But in the meantime, it's going to be a rough summer. And I don't think there's anything at this point, it's so late. I don't think there's anything they can do significantly to improve the trends organically without giving the beer away, which is what they're doing and what they're going to do. So that's all I have to say about Bud Light.
Oh, that's it. Just that little nugget.
That's all. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, really, since the spring meeting. And, we have relationships with every supplier. They're not always great. They're good. Sometimes they're bad. They flow like waves up and down, but we always treat people fairly. And I feel like we've treated AB fairly. We will continue to treat them fairly, but they are not going to treat us fairly. They're trying to position the trade press as kind of almost they're blaming us for this backlash somehow. I mean, that's the word I'm getting back from AB distributors, which is absurd. And don't talk to the trade press. Whatever you don't talk to the trade press. Well, I mean, we're all in this together. This hurts us too. Nobody wants to see this happening because, as we reported, we're not getting all the cases lost out of Bud Light. It's probably going to hard liquor. Most, Miller Lite and Coors Light, Modelo can only do so much. So, again, that's all I have to say about it. But so let's move on. So, what else are we talking about today, Jen?
Well, we're talking about AB versus Cancun Cruise, and I know that you said that there is more coming this week. I think there is more coming this week on that front, but let's get our legal eagle, Bianca, the latest that we found out about that, because that is important. To your point, Harry, we've gotten some people say, well, why are you covering this sideshow? When a sitting senator, raises an inquiry, it's a big deal. And
even if he's a clown.
Even if he is a clown, which he is. Let's make no bones about that.
Cancun Cruise.
Cancun Cruise, so named for those who don't know, because when we had this crazy storm in February of 21, I believe, this guy flew to Cancun instead of being here to help when people die. Like people died. Anyway,
That
Bianca,
tells
take
you
it
all
away.
you need to know about his character.
So for those who maybe aren't familiar with Ted Cruz's letter, in May, he sent a letter to, Brendan, and it was addressed to Brendan both because of his position on a Beer Institute board, right? Am I correct to say that?
Yes.
And obviously because he's CEO of AB. And so Ted was seeking, and along with this other senator, but of course, he's the one who really publicized the letter and went on, all the political talk shows to talk about it when he released it. He requested a investigation from the Beer Institute's Code Compliance Review Board related to the Mulvaney promo. Of course, he called it, I think, an ongoing partnership or something like that, which is not the correct characterization of what it was. But the nugget of truth that I think we saw when we read it was the potential of it advertising to an underage audience. And so that's kind of what Ted latched onto and said that they were looking to investigate at a congressional level. So it was kind of a two-part letter. He both requested the BI's Code Compliance Review Board initiate an investigation, and then he set a May 31st deadline requesting a bunch of documents from AB related to the partnership with Mulvaney. And I think that was probably a tall order. It wasn't, requested as part of a legal process. It wasn't a loss, where you'd have to give up information. And I don't know how common or how frequently, companies will give up their proprietary internal documents as related to, kind of a witch hunt. So he requested those docs from AB by May 31st. And so last week I said, well, what happened with that deadline? Because it had passed. And obviously a lot of folks in regular news have covered this beyond the trade press, and no one had kind of followed up on that letter and that deadline. And so I reached out to Ted's office, and they confirmed that they didn't receive any requested documents from AB by that May 31st deadline. And they were unhappy with the response in general, saying that they did get a letter, but it wasn't signed by Brendan or anyone at AB. And then beyond that, which I think is maybe more interesting because it does further the story of this concern of potential advertising to non-legal age youth, is the BI is apparently investigating per Ted's request. And so the BI did not comment on it to us, but Ted's office confirmed that an investigation is happening.
Yeah, which is interesting. And I have heard through reliable sources that there is more to come down the pike on that this week. I hopefully we'll post this pod today. That could come as early as tomorrow, I'm hearing, or Thursday. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the same thing that Harry's talking about. But just to both of your point, this thing is clearly not going away. And so we'll see where it goes from here. But safe to say that it is not going away anytime soon. Anything to weigh in on, Jordan?
Well, I was just going to add that the BI said they can't comment on an ongoing investigation, implying that they are looking into it. So I don't know what will come of it. I think everybody can agree that Cruz is a clown, but he obviously had some help in picking this battle, because this is one that, it doesn't really come down to politics. It's an issue that he brings up to bev alc suppliers that they cannot ignore. You can't say, don't know what you're talking about, not going to pay any attention to this. Someone accuses you of, catering to underage consumers, that is something you have to take a look at. And so it was a smart move for, their further fueling of this fire. But we'll see what comes of it, because the advertising was all on, platforms that have age gates. and it seems like they did their due diligence. One can argue that her influence does cater towards younger adults, and we had talked about that even prior to this letter, as Harry was talking about earlier. So I don't know where it goes, but it
is interesting to me where Ted Cruz got this, because like you said, Jordan, he had to have gotten it from somebody in the industry, and I suspect it might be distributors.
Yeah,
but I don't know. But he had to have had somebody in the industry to point him in this direction, because I just don't think you would,
No, I mean, no offense to the Beer Institute, but for people outside of the industry, I don't know if they could name, the regulatory trade organization representing the big brewers.
Yeah.
That's just kind of inside baseball. It was also funny, and I'm not trying to draw any parallels here, but when Gavin was asked last week at the Deutsche Bank Staples conference about their marketing measures, the thing he said first and foremost is our marketing committee board looks at it and makes sure it's all kosher with the BI's code of compliance. That was the first thing he said. So
yeah, where were the AB board of compliance?
So
yeah, so maybe AB did, and maybe it's already clear, and it's just going through it, spinning the wheels. But I don't know. I think that may have come out a little sooner. I don't know. It is a strange, or it's an issue that we said you can't overlook. You can't just pass off. So,
and yeah, the interesting thing too is we still don't exactly know what happened, right? Like we had the letter that came out from one distributor that said, it was a third-party marketing company, right? We don't actually know if that's true because AB has not confirmed that. And I think that they have decided that it doesn't behoove them to confirm or deny any of that, right? But then Jordan, you use the word, I think it's not political, but I think maybe we're in agreement that it is political, but this particular way that he's getting into the code is, that's more tactical. And then the one last thing I would say about this, because, we do oscillate between not covering it to fan the flames because we don't want to do that, but we do have to cover it as a relevant business beer publication. There's no way you can't cover it at this point, right? To that point, I mean, the reason it's not going away is because it's become much, much bigger than the Bud Light brand. I don't know if you guys saw, there was an RBC, Nick Modi and co note a couple weeks ago with Numerator, and they talked about like where the lapsed Bud Light houses, where they're concentrated. And overall, he says, they over-index to 55 and older, primarily white Caucasian, lower rates of higher education. I mean, there is AB's core group, Bud Light's core group, is making this a much bigger issue, showing like we have socioeconomic buying power. And even if they wanted to drink Bud Light, which obviously was already, the trends for 15 years, it's been bleeding for 15 years. So this is already an acceleration in the COVID era of accelerated trends. Anyway, this has just become more about like the buying power and the other power in general of one particular like socioeconomic status people that tend to be Bud Light's core, right? And so it is a political thing, I'm trying to say, and is not going away because obviously it's become shorthand as we've been publishing too, right? It's like pulling a Bud Light. So you don't come back from that, especially not in such a charged political era where we're about to have an election, right? And where, every time Trump gets indicted, I feel like their resolves, right? Like we're definitely not drinking Bud Light now. And it wasn't a huge jump to make. This was a plane crash. So many things had to be just right. I mean, they hadn't marketed the brand in 3 years, right? The trend, however this grenade came to happen, which we still don't know, right? And it's DOA, right? Mick Ultra will be king, right? So
it was a perfect storm. And I think that's why these group of people feel so emboldened and say, hey, doing this, let's, show them what happened to Bud Light.
Yep.
But I don't know if that's if they can replicate that.
No.
Because Bud Light's trends were down.
Right.
It was easy to turn to something else.
Yes.
And for Chick-fil-A, for some of these others, those are kind of in a class of their own.
Disney.
Yeah. And you can't just say, let's show them what we did to Bud Light, because all the pieces were in place for this to just crater.
Anything was the, match that lit the powder keg or whatever, whatever they say, whatever the saying is. But
I
anyway,
have a question as someone new to the industry. I mean, how often does the BI's Code Compliance Review Board initiate an investigation? And are they ever public? Like, does the trade press or the public ever know about that? Is that something they advertise?
I don't remember the last time that happened.
They, during the Four Loko stuff, they had some action, I believe, on that. And then there was a brand that Pabst had, and I can't remember the brand, but it was with Snoop Dogg, and it was like in a big 24-ounce can. And I think there might have been something there, but yeah, it's very rare.
And that was 12 years. I mean, the Four Loko thing was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's rare because, all the brewers are now on board. And also, the rules are a lot looser. I mean, nobody seems to care anymore. I mean, AB had to pull products just because of that were seen unseemly that would fly today for sure.
Yeah.
Spikes and, what was that drink that Molson had? Sparks. Yeah. I mean, that Sparks is nothing.
Yeah.
But whatever.
I think it's a big undertaking for them to investigate certain things now with social media too, to try and pull all the numbers for the followers of Dylan Mulvaney, someone that has millions of followers. Sure. I don't know how they get those analytics and how easily those would be handed over to them.
Yeah.
So once social media has kind of made things really difficult, I think, and determining who the audience is and investigating that make.
Right. Well, I think Harry's got to run in 5. So let's move along to the Bang update that Bianca has. Yes. Speaking of ordeals, here's the next one from our Legal Eagle. If you're wondering what's happening with Bang.
So Bang's bankruptcy is underway. Although I was telling Jen before we hopped on the call, the sale has been rescheduled multiple times the past several weeks. So I think there is some background negotiations happening, obviously, that's kind of tying up the actual sale and public notice of all of that, because there was supposed to be a court hearing this week, and that's got pushed back. And yesterday I got a notification that they don't even have a rescheduled date yet. So we don't even know when that's supposed to happen and if it'll actually happen, since it's been rescheduled multiple times. And it seems like that could perhaps be indicative of things going on behind the scenes we're not privy to. And, the fact that some retailers have shared with us and some distributors that they're pulling the brands. So maybe that's impacting the sale.
I heard from distributor last week that one very large retailer is phasing them out. Now that could just be regional, but and we've reported on that. Different retailers phasing them out as well before in drugstores. So
it looks to me like Monster is the only buyer. That could be the only buyer because they have that liability that why would you buy Bang when you have this overhanging liability to Monster?
Yeah.
So
why would you even buy Bang at this point though, Harry? Right?
Yeah,
are they waiting for it to get small enough share to where it wouldn't trigger an antitrust review?
I don't think they would even put it in market.
Yeah.
They would buy it to kill it.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
To take it out back. Yeah.
Or to have it as a budget brand to go in a lower price point.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah.
That actually, you make it trendy, make it.
It's the new PBR.
Yeah, but like, especially in this day and age, we need like a brand segmentation for something that's completely shit the bed, but it's cool now.
Right. I mean, Bang fits that perfectly. I mean, it was because, energy is such a young segment that it really doesn't have a budget player yet that's emerged.
Right.
And so it's probably time for that segment to sub-segment into price because it's
Totally.
such an expensive product, and it shouldn't be. It's not expensive to make. I mean,
Right.
No, I
And-
think I learned that during the trial.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know how much super creatine costs, but I don't think it's
I got some right here.
What-
Turns out it's just baby powder.
What's
Sure.
funny to me is, I don't have any problem buying budget beer, which, is alcohol and is already somewhat harmful. But for budget energy, because I've seen some off-brand cheap energy drinks, and I'm like, no way am I
Yeah.
touching that.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
No.
that seems just so much more dangerous.
Motor oil, right? That is so funny. Yeah, they should rebrand it GNAB, which of course is bang backwards, sell it for half the price, and throw Jack Owak on the can. Hologram of him doing this.
I'm
What
gonna
else? Who
miss
else
Jack.
can we piss off? Who else?
Yeah.
Not to go back to Bud Light, but there is one thing that I was kind of fascinated by and Jen, you were kind of pointing out the lapsed consumers. It's, older white people, but still I was
Under 40K household income.
Yeah, but I was still surprised to see that seltzer has seen almost no lift from the retreat of people from AB brands. And the reason I think because you may not associate the two, but when seltzer was coming up, everybody said, this is the new premium light. When seltzer was growing, everybody assumed that it was taking share of premium light. And now when there's the biggest brand in beer bleeding, seltzer is nowhere to be seen picking up any of this. And you look at IRI, all the top brands losing share, it's AB and hard seltzers. And there's almost none of them gaining share. And I thought there had to be some people that maybe, weren't just core premium light drinkers that said, well, maybe I'll give seltzer a shot. And it doesn't look like that's happening at all, which I think is another rough sign for seltzer heading into summer.
Yeah. Well, White Claw is obviously doing pretty well, but I will foray a little bit into the Encompass show, which we won't have time to cover today. We'll schedule another pod. But I think, to me, I think there's two things. One is I think seltzer tends to skew a little bit younger, and obviously Bud Light tends to skew older. But then the other thing is I think that we assume too much that there's a one-to-one transaction for brand switching. Like they're going to switch from this to something exactly like it, when especially for younger demographics, their tree is all over the place. And just to kind of bring up something from the Encompass show, so we will bother her a lot more now, but I met this lady and she was on my panel, Christine Shriver from Scoopos, and they basically try to quantify the indie C-store world. So I think they're in like 15,000 of those stores at the point of sale, collecting real-time data, and represents about like 17% of that indie market. And she was saying how they can see like these decision trees and the switching. And so she was saying they were seeing things like Twisted Tea benefiting from the Bud Light fallout, right? And so I think, people's consumers like trees, switching trees, decision trees these days are so complicated that you can't really reliably say, okay, they're going to go from this to this. I mean, a certain group may, especially if it's the same demographic, maybe, but they could go all over the damn place, right? I mean, we've got switching into spirits. We've, we've said it before, but to Harry's point. So it's going to be very interesting from here on out, but it is interesting. You're right, Jordan. I mean, you would expect seltzer to benefit because that has been the rhetoric, that it's sort of and Boston used to say things like that a year ago, right? So,
right.
Yeah, and
I think the price point difference is what's hindering it.
That's true too.
Twisted Tea is a better value to those. If you're a Bud Light drinker, you really are probably looking at price, and so I think there's obviously been a lot of switching over to Miller Lite and Coors Light, but Coors Banquet also is just on fire, and Yingling, and so yeah, Twisted.
But yeah, as we were just talking about, it's not all going back to beer,
Right?
And category trends are going down as well. It was up a couple points year to date heading into this. Now it's flat, and probably flat heading into the most important time of the year, which is not good.
Yeah. AB will, when they print their script for second quarter, I predict that their volume will be down 17%. That's my number, because, and I'm talking about the whole company.
Okay. Yeah.
I think their on-premise fallout's been even worse than off-premise. So, any trend you see in scan data is going to be worse when they unload their shipments. And so, plus they're giving it away. So somebody sent me there's a C-store. You know how C-stores have those placards out front that show their deals? And it was like, $16.99 for a Coors Light. And then it said, Bud Light, make your best offer.
Jeez.
Yeah. What's wild about this upcoming quarter too is it's going to be April 1st, the very beginning.
Right.
So, the 3 months after that. So it's going to cover the whole entire extent. And I don't disagree, Harry. It's going to be ugly.
Yeah.
Hey, Garth Brooks is going to bat for him, though. That's
gotta love old Garth, man. He still has staying power.
He sure does. Not
The
like
guy,
that Travis Tritt.
He didn't lay down and roll over for the Spotify and all this BS. He stuck to his guns. You can't find his music anywhere online. Like you have to actually go and buy a CD to get his music. But talk about a Bud Light demographic. His customers don't even have MP4. They don't know what that is. It's all DVDs still.
Thunder rolls.
I love that song.
Strikes.
So
I just like him because he's married to Trisha Yearwood, and she likes to cook like me.
Yeah, does she? I like that Trisha Yearwood.
She has like a Trisha's table or something. I don't know. Bianca likes to cook.
I do too. I make butthole chili twice a year. So
I don't know that I want to know why it's called that.
Yes.
Don't sit on Harry's toilet. He'd be harvesting buttholes, girl.
Butthole chili.
Butthole chili.
The burns going in, burns coming out. That's the tagline.
Probably have to cut that. Wait, since we're talking about butts, I got one quick story. We did a frisbee golf tournament, my family this weekend. By the way, we saw Michael from Austin Beer Works. So, Austin nerd power.
What a pack of nerds. I was about to say.
Oh, Harry, you should have seen the wildlife out there. Wolf spiders this big, 4 different walking sticks. Katie did up the wazoo. It was a bonanza. But anyway, they're reading through the team name, and the lady goes, Poop Ship Destroyers. And Bill, my husband, goes, what? She goes, Poop Ship Destroyers. It was great. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Poop Ship Destroyer. So is that in reference to the poop ship?
I think so.
Yeah.
But you see, Harry, it's a double entendre.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Bianca's like, this is ridiculous.
That poop ship, it was a cruise ship that the toilet stopped working and the engine was down, and they were just a floating dumpster just spilling sewage off the side. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen on TV. I have never gotten on a boat after that. I don't, even if it's a little fishing boat, I don't get on boats anymore. That scared me straight. I am never gonna that poop ship. Oh, I still see images of it, and it's just awful.
Poop ship, pooping on the poop deck. Yep.
Okay, we get it, Jen. Enough. We got to muzzle her down sometimes.
My mother would be scandalized.
She would be so proud.
Like, no, she would not. She would be like, Jennifer, I didn't raise you to talk about, say the S word. And this is a woman who, she has a tight relationship with God. She prays for a parking space, and the skies part, the clouds part, and it appears. Okay.
Well, have her put in a prayer with the big guy upstairs for us.
I will. Right? I will. I don't fly without her praying for me.
Good. All right, guys. Well, great episode. Thanks for being on, and we'll shout at you again next week. And don't forget to smash that like button and leave a comment. leave a comment for God's sakes. We don't, it's like a one-way medium here. We don't know what you guys are thinking. So just leave a comment.
Deepan Shah leaves a comment.
Yeah, he leaves a comment every time. He's got a huge crush on Jen.
No, he's a bot.
He does. He's not
a
a bot. He's not a bot. He's not. I swear to God. I think he's tied in with the Nelk
Happy
Boys,
Dad. Yeah.
the Happy Dad guys. Yeah. So Jen, just be nice.
I love you. I love you, D. Love you, D. Smash that like button again.
All right, guys. Take care.
All right. Bye, guys.
See ya.